Argentina launched its first mini-satellite into space on Thursday as part of a project that aims to provide internet coverage to remote areas of the country. The Pan American Health Organization has again praised Cuba's COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Israeli police repressed Bedouin protesters as they mobilized against a tree planting project in the Negev desert, where they continue to fight for recognition of their land rights. So from the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Argentina launched its first mini-satellite into space on Thursday as part of a project that aims to provide internet coverage to remote areas of the country. The 461-gram mini-satellite named San Martin was developed by the Argentine company Innova Space, together with students from a technical education school in Mar del Plata. San Martin is part of the Libertators of America Constellation project that includes other devices of its kind named after independence heroes. According to the government, the aim of the initiative is to create an internet communication constellation that provides that total coverage throughout the region and can aid in forecast of weather to allow for planning to stimulate an increase in agricultural production for all the countries of South America. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez accompanied the mission from the presidential palace, where he congratulated the team in charge and described it as an act of sovereignty.
This is sovereignty. This is what will allow us to learn about such important issues as climatology in a country that needs to know about climatology, to be able to develop agriculture, livestock, to even safeguard our people from possible rivers overflowing, rains, weather conditions. It is so important, but so important that the truth is that I am full of satisfaction and I congratulate you heartily. I congratulate you.
The Colombian capital saw a day of solidarity with the people of Arauca, with the aim of drawing attention to the serious humanitarian violations in the northeastern department. Our correspondent Hernan Tovar has the story.
Social movements, human rights defenders and people from Arauca came to this corner in the center of Bogotá to visibilize the serious situation experienced in the department. Instead of militarizing and stigmatizing, instead of fueling the conflict and seeking to escalate the confrontation in order to have clearer arguments to intensify actions in the border area and possibly affect the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the national government should focus on social investment, which is what the people of Arauca need. The Colombian state has a historic debt with Arauca, which has lost many lives in resistance, but above all provided economic resources from the old wealth of Caño Limón. A day of solidarity calling for the adoption of humanitarian measures and not war strategies, such as those currently implemented by the Duque government.
The truth is that we feel very distressed by what is happening there, because the truth is that what we feel, we do not have the support of our president, and we want peace. As women of Arauca, we have always been committed to the peace process, and we want peace for our department, and we do not want any more death in our department, or more displacement. We do not want more hunger in our department, and we want all the guarantees for our population of Arauca.
These sectors are calling for the implementation of the peace accords and for dialogue strategies with the armed groups in the department. Human rights organizations reject the response of the Iván Duque government to militarize even more a territory that is already heavily militarized. We believe that the solution to what is happening today in Arauca is not more militarization, but dialogue with the communities, social investment to allow for the balanced development of this region, whose natural resources have been plundered. The United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs warned that after the events of January the 2nd, in which more than 20 people were killed in Arauca, the intensification of the violence saw the number of displaced persons rise to more than 400 in the municipalities of Aracuita, Fortul, Tame and Saravena.
Hernán Darío Tobar, Telesur, Bogotá, Colombia.
Thank you, Hernan, for this report, and now we continue to other topics. Bolivia's public prosecutor's office on Thursday filed a multi-crime indictment against two former ministers of the de facto regime installed following the 2019 coup against former President Evo Morales. The case surrounds the irregular purchase of the tear gas during the coup-born regime led by Janine Áñez, with charges against 9 people. Those accused include the former ministers of government, Arturo Murillo, of Defense, Luis Fernando López, 6 subordinates from both ministries, and the U.S. businessman Brian Samuel Bergman. The Attorney General reported that the economic damage to the state caused by the dirty deal was about $2.3 million. One of the accused, Arturo Murillo, was arrested in May last year in the United States and charged with corruption in the same case linked to the purchase of anti-riot equipment in the midst of the protests against the coup. An Inter-American Commission on Human Rights investigations established that 37 people were killed in the repression by military forces and the police forces in the wake of the coup. Meanwhile, former de facto President Janine Áñez has been detained since March 2020 for this case and other alleged crimes.
The Prosecutor's Commission presented before the Judicial Court the formal accusation against 9 people involved in the irregular contracting process for the acquisition of anti-riot gases for the Bolivian police through the Ministry of Defense, carried out at the end of the 2019 administration. The formal accusation was filed against the former Minister of Government, Arturo Murillo, who was declared a rebel, and the former Minister of Defense, Luis Fernando López, also a rebel.
Costa Rica's parliament on Thursday approved the legalization of the cultivation, production, and industrialization, and also the commercialization of hemp and medical cannabis after 3 years of discussion of the bill. The lawmaker who promoted the bill, Zoila Bolio, welcomed the move, claiming that it will generate investment, employment, and economic growth. But she stressed that the most important thing that was chronically ill patients will be able to get a quality medicine at a reasonable price in order to have quality of life. Bolio submitted the proposal at the beginning of 2019. However, obstacles in the Legislative Assembly, with a group of members against it, and later in the executive branch, which did not prioritize it as an urgent, meant that time passed with little progress made. According to the legislation, the Ministry of Agriculture will regulate the hemp market, and the Ministry of Health will regulate the medical and therapeutic cannabis market. We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Pan American Health Organization has again praised Cuba's COVID-19 vaccination campaign. At a virtual press conference, the director of the regional organization, Carissa Etienne, offered an update on the pandemic situation in the Americas, including the spread of the Omicron variant, and noted that countries such as Chile, Cuba, and Argentina have the highest vaccination rates. The representative praised Cuba's prestigious biotechnology sector, explaining it has developed 5 different COVID-19 vaccines to date, including Abdala, Soberana 2, and Soberana Plus, and all of which will provide upwards of 90% protection against symptomatic COVID when administered in 3 doses. The country of roughly 11 million remains the only in Latin America and the Caribbean to have produced a homegrown shot against COVID-19. The World Health Organization reported the highest ever number of people infected with coronavirus over a 24-hour period. According to the organization, nearly 3.4 million cases were detected globally. The new daily record came at a time when the Omicron variant is now widespread. The UN Health Agency emphasized the number of positive cases registered in a single day were the same as in the first 4 months of the pandemic. Nevertheless, the increasing rate of infection has not majorly affected the death rate statistics. The Omicron variant, initially identified in South Africa, is present in 58.5% of the tests carried out by the global network GZ laboratories. The highest number of confirmed infections reported by the WHO was in the United States, followed by India, Brazil, the United Kingdom, and France. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who is recovering from COVID-19, expressed hope that the pandemic was coming to an end, noting that although the country has seen a record surge in cases, the Omicron variant does not appear to be as lethal as previous strains.
I find it quite encouraging to be able to see for myself that this COVID variant does not have the lethality, the danger of the previous variant, the so-called Delta variant. This means that this pandemic is on its way out. It is still a pandemic, but I believe that with this new variant, there are not many risks. Hospitalizations are not going to increase. There are hospitalizations, but they are not increasing a lot, and the most important thing is that we are not going to have more deaths.
The African continent has exceeded 10 million confirmed COVID-19 cases, and the world enters a third year of the pandemic. And the continent remains no closer to rolling out widespread vaccination.
The world has entered the third year of the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has caused great devastation. Millions of lives have been lost and livelihood wiped out. Here in Africa, cumulative case has now exceeded 10 million and more than 230,000 people have sadly. Although Africa appears to be emerging from the peak of its fourth pandemic wave, vaccination, which is a pivotal measure against this virus, remain far too low. About 50% of the world population is now fully vaccinated. In Africa, this is just 10%.
And French teachers launched nationwide strike action on Thursday over the government's chaotic virus strategy for schools. Teachers, unions, and school staff demanded clarity from the government on coronavirus measures. The strike comes as France's presidential election campaign gets underway ahead of the April vote. The walkout is awkward for President Emmanuel Macron's government, which has prided itself on keeping schools open to ease pressure on the parents throughout the pandemic. Tens of thousands of students are off sick with COVID-19, while the protocols to be implemented in schools have changed several times, sparking confusion. Teachers denounce a lack of personal protective equipment, such as face masks. The Education Ministry reported that almost 40% of primary school teachers had walked out, while the country's top sector union put the figure at 75%, with one primary school in 2 closed for the day.
Since the beginning of the crisis, the teachers have been carrying the schools on their shoulders, and today their shoulders can't take anymore because we always have protocols in place. We don't anticipate the protocols. We learn about them the day before the next day from the press. There is also a method of Minister Blanquer that annoys, that crystallizes anger.
We should avoid health protocols where you need a degree to understand them. We need health protocols that are easy to apply, and what we are asking is that the testing policy, for example, be done at school, and that it not be supported by parents who are obliged to queue for 2 hours to get a test for their child because they received an email the night before at 10 p.m. Finally, we are walking on our heads. We spend our time checking emails, answering the phone. In my school, in 1 week, I have 24 positive cases, so we have an incidence rate of about 8%.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Palestinians and their allies of the resistance bloc denounce a new aggressive Israeli escalation against the Bedouin inhabitants of the Palestinian desert of the Negev. Our correspondent Hisham Wanus has the details.
Israeli troops resumed their attacks on the Negev Bedouin and demolished their tents, as Israeli police bulldozers stormed villages in the area and began leveling their land in preparation for the expropriation of this strategic region, which represents 50% of the total area of historic Palestine. We denounce that the Palestinian people continue to be victims of the aggressive colonialist and terrorist practices of the Zionist occupation, and in the face of this reality, our people stand firm and work for unity and joint action until the liberation of all the occupied territories, including this strategic area in the south of the country, to recover our free, independent and sovereign Palestine. Bedouin villages, not recognized by the Israeli government, rose up in defense of their lands. However, the demonstrators were repressed with rubber bullets and tear gas, in addition to raids and arbitrary arrests that targeted more than 40 Palestinians, including women and children, a gross violation of human rights, as denounced by Palestinians and their allies. We support the trend of resistance adopted by the Palestinian resistance factions and all free peoples of the world, and on this basis we support all resistance actions as the only option for the liberation of Palestine, and demand that the Arab government assume their responsibilities to support this resistance endorsed by the UN Charter and international legality. All the resistance forces and all the free peoples of the world who believe in the justice of the Palestinian cause are currently facing a great challenge with this new aggressive escalation against the Palestinian people and their legitimate rights, and must therefore proceed to take practical measures in the different military, political and economic fields that will lead to the triumph of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Negev Desert is an area of strategic importance for Tel Aviv and Washington due to its strategic position and natural resources, where in addition to stealing its underground springs of 11 billion cubic meters of water, they seek to install a phosphate plant, several solar energy projects, and numerous military bases near the Israeli nuclear reactor Dimona, in the service of the Zionist U.S. plans against the entire Middle East region.
Hisham News, Telesur, Oriente Medio.
Thank you, Hisham, for this report, and now we continue. The United Nations warned that the world is in a race against time to avoid a humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan. Secretary General Antonio Guterres said a nightmare was unfolding in the war-torn country and stressed that freezing temperatures and frozen assets are the lethal combination for the Afghan people. After foreign troops withdrew, leaving the Taliban back in power after 20 years of war and occupation, the international community decided to freeze crucial assets, depriving the country of funds. The statements came 2 days after launching the largest humanitarian appeal ever for a single country. According to the UN, more than half of the population now depends on life-saving assistance, and without a concerted effort from the international community, virtually every man, woman and child in Afghanistan could face acute poverty amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Freezing temperatures and frozen assets are a lethal combination for the people of Afghanistan. Rules and conditions that prevent money from being used to save lives and the economy must be suspended in this emergency situation. International funding should be allowed to pay the salaries of public sector workers and to help Afghan institutions deliver healthcare, education and other vital services. Without creative, flexible and constructive engagement by the international community, Afghanistan's economic situation will only worsen. Despair and extremism will grow. We need to act now to prevent economic and social collapse and find ways to prevent further suffering for millions of Afghans.
As peacekeeping troops of the Collective Security Treaty Organization began withdrawing from Kazakhstan, Russian President Vladimir Putin highlighted the importance of what the forces had accomplished.
The fact that with the help of the CSTO forces, it has been possible to restore the law and the order. It is very important. In fact, this is the first such operation by the CSTO forces. Together, we have completed a very important task. This will allow the leadership of the Republic of Kazakhstan to resolve issues of socio-economic and political nature in a free, calm mode, in a dialogue with society. It is very important.
12 people, including a senior army officer, are in custody in Burkina Faso after an alleged plot to destabilize institutions was uncovered this week. 15 people have been arrested since Monday, comprising 2 officers, 7 non-commissioned officers, a senior officer and 5 civilians, and the Armed Forces Minister said after a cabinet meeting. Of these, 2 civilians and a soldier have been released after giving preliminary testimony, leaving 12 in preventive detention, she said. According to the minister, the arrests were ordered by prosecutors at the military tribunal in the capital after investigators received a tip-off from a soldier over a suspected attempt to destabilize the institutions of state. The impoverished landlocked West African country has a long history of coup and is battling an insurgency that swept in from neighboring Mali in 2015. The conflict has claimed at least 2,000 lives and forced 1.5 million people from their homes, according to the National Emergency Aid body CONASUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.